Okay, let's start by laying down some basic chalk walls. Now we can lay down the basic floor brushes. So we've started our floor. Now let's take a look at our glyph rules. So glyph rule number 2 is contrast. Contrasting is basically the act of producing a varied depth of brightness to bring out the details of your map, at the same time as hiding sort of any areas that you would prefer not to focus attention onto. Now, just as an example of how contrasting can improve your map, let's take a look at a random room I selected from Poseidon B. If you look, they have put pretty much the same texture on all the surfaces in here, and it might even be a stock texture as well. Looks sort of low quality. But you can tell that even though this room has quite a bit of detail on it, for example around the windows, because of the lack of texture contrast, it all blends together. You can also see a relatively simple ceiling sort of light as well. So let's start with the floor. We will begin with some borders that will help the contrasting on the floor. I just pick each layer of the floor and create a border around the outside, applying different textures to the centre than you have on the borders, normally darker on the borders. Let's try doing dark in the middle for a change. Do dark in the middle and light around the outside. Actually, no, let's do dark around the outside. I know that one looks good. Now we can put in our glowing blue floor edge texture. Now, I don't like the look of this centre area. I would probably prefer the outside to be dark and the inside to be light, as I mentioned earlier. So this is where I will show you one of the advantages of using EF Radiant. So we paste into Notepad. So let's replace Carpet Dark with Carpet Light 2. Actually, no. Let's do Carpet Dog. Then Carpet Light will be replaced with Carpet Dark. And Carpet Dog will be replaced with Carpet Light. So this way you can replace all the textures and they will keep the same fitting without having to reassign all the textures manually. GTK doesn't allow you to copy to clipboard for some reason, so if you wanted to do this without EF Radiant, you'd have to open up the map file and manually change it there. So the next thing is curves. Let's go back to the Poseidon image. You can see that they did a separate carpet layer with the blue light under it. The problem is that Elite Force doesn't have the best anti-aliasing, so by putting curves on the edge of the steps, you will soften the edges, and if you remember me saying, contrasting also numbs out the areas you don't want to draw attention to, such as these horrible solid floor edges. So what I tend to do is put little end cap curves around the edge of these brushes, like that. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, let's try and fit this texture a little bit better. And there you have it. Let's get some more done. So there we are, almost an hour in, and we've done a floor. Woohoo! So I'll probably speed up certain bits. Don't think people want to watch like a 3 hours long video just to sort of make part of the room. So we've done some carpet. I'm not 100% happy, but we'll just leave it as that for now. So let's take a look at this wall. So another thing when it comes to contrasting is if you look at, say, this wall, you can see you have floor, then wall, then ceiling. That wall is completely bare, and you can see where the texture repeats. It doesn't look very interesting. It's very plain, and there's not a lot sort of going on there. So, and another thing is it really shows how old the engine is when you don't contrast, which is another thing. So the basic texture hasn't been resized as well. So it's kind of big, but because it's not very good in terms of being tileable, this particular texture would probably look pretty bad if it was scaled down anymore. So if we just start with this wall and apply our basic light texture, it's too big. So we change the texture fitting so it's much denser. And because the noise in my basic is done at random, my basic texture is done at random, it tiles really well. Whereas on Poseidon you can see the texture repeating with sort of a line here and a line there. Second thing is that, you know, it's a pretty boring wall. One texture going from ceiling to floor, not very interesting. If you were to look around in most common houses, you'd probably find, you know, skirting or architrave, or something that breaks up the wall from the ceiling and the floor. So all I do is create a small section at the bottom. And apply the basic dark texture. I don't have any plain walls in my maps. I believe that's like Griff rule number 3 or something. And this wall still isn't very interesting, but I think something is supposed to be there. What do the plans say is there? Oh yeah, there's a console, which is not surprising as there aren't many plain walls. There's normally something there. Okay. If you have a plain wall like that, then to me it means it's not finished yet. Now, I'm not trying to pick at other people's work and say it's a crap map. It's just, I'm doing a video on how to make maps more detailed, and these are the rules that I follow, and using an existing map as an example is the best way to show how people can improve their maps. So that's that bit there. Now, as I recall, the back area has a large console area, and it looks like it has sort of pillars coming out a little bit. Where's the Jenolan Bridge illustrations? Okay, this is what we're working on. This is the section we're working on. Now you can see that a lot of the walls have small plates on them. And details to make them a little more interesting. So we're going to have to make something similar. So why don't we make a texture like that? A few panels spread around a wall to make it look, you know, a little less plain in these corners. So let's make those textures. And this is the point where I realise that the music I chose probably isn't the best, bit over dramatic. Oh my god, this is ridiculous. Could at least have some Borg or something.
We are the woman. You will watch my memory. Resistance is futile.
All I'm doing is making a texture. So, we'll leave it as that. I'm not all that happy. Looks way too cartoony, but that's fine for now. So, we'll need to get that template texture back up so we can work out where the pillar is supposed to be. And that's our thin corner area. Now we want to make sure we keep the skirting bit going around, that's important. This texture looks very cartoony, looks awful. Anyway, this isn't a texturing tutorial, this is a mapping video. So that's going to go there. This is going to go on both sides as well. About 2 is average for a pillar in terms of width. I need a bit more time with these. Go around by hand, make it look less cartoony. They look horrible, nasty. Hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them. Next on the list is some kind of console, isn't it? What are the pillars like as well? Very boring. Motion picture, next gen sort of period had lots of sharp edges on their sets, and I don't really like that, so let's make our own. What's the next thing on the Griff rules then? That one we are already doing. Texture for your map, don't map for your textures. So try to make your textures to suit your map. You can add in sort of extra lighting effects and shaders and whatnot based on how the texture is going to be used around the map. And it really does add to the detail and to the feel of the map if you can tweak stuff like that. We got no wall left behind, we've covered that. Try to break up areas with different colours to make it more interesting, and make sure you don't have loads of blank walls. Know your stuff. That one is concept images and whatnot. I have some of those. And a good tip is to look up sort of Star Trek prop auctions for the details, and look up for set pieces that were used repeatedly and in different locations and even in different TV series. They can be quite useful to put into your maps. So we have our chrome texture for our metal bars and our pillars. Quite easy to make one. I don't use many, if any, stock textures. That's another thing. If you can texture as well as map, you're well on your way to creating a detailed looking map. If not, you're probably not going to get the detail looking as good. The other advantage as well is modding your textures. If you wanted a slightly different chrome texture, you can just change the texture's image, whereas you can't change the stock textures or other maps textures without affecting those maps. Right, so that's the back area done. Very boring. Not really a lot going on there. This area is too plain, nothing to look at. So we are going to go into overdrive with detail now. So as I mentioned earlier, if you get concept images and look up set pieces and so forth, you begin to see sort of patterns in the set designs, things that are all over the place, make the room look a lot more busy, but no one really pays attention to them. They're just sort of there and people tend to forget about them. So just look through some images and have a think of what you know might look good on your map. For example, this wall light, you might just look past that normally, but it adds detail. It's not really needed, but it's not needed to actually light the room. It's just there to make that wall look a bit more interesting because there's nothing else on that wall. There's one on the bridge that I use quite a lot, which is these are everywhere, these things. I think they've actually been on every set somewhere since the Next Generation. Also, if you look around the room and focus on each of the surfaces, you will begin to see how the walls are broken up. There's normally something going down or across the surface just to make it look more interesting and to break it up so you don't have a solid wall with nothing going on. Right, so I'm going to put in some of these then. Also, you can see we have this sort of very simple brush for this console. Don't really like that, so we're going to add in a tiny little railing that just goes around to hold on to in case the ship's shaking or exploding. See, this is sort of random. I'm not really doing anything here. I'm just sort of adding stuff in and seeing how it looks. If it looks good, keeping it in. I don't actually know what I'm doing anymore. I was just putting in random stuff now, just to sort of add detail. What did they do on these straight wall parts here? Oh, they put like a panel on there as well. That's alright then. So, that's good. All we need to do now is just lift these things up a little bit. They could be red alert lights actually. I could turn them into red alert lights. That'd be good.